I had a first project for the Yoak arrow now, using the condemner bolt gun from Graphics with a few other combi weapons as a model, and a new bionic eye with examples of Mechanicus scanners. I also wanted hundreds of these bionic eyes but as picked cameras, to be used for my Lamenters and Silent Sisters helmets and even for the Knights and Titans. So I provided a crate of basic bionic eyes and helmet lenses, and just let the orange primates have fun. This Xenolab was set up on an asteroid fort, with walls of blackstone and adamantium, although they won't really hold the joke arrow if they wanted to escape. For that you only needed to provide fruits and sweets, and they'll work happily as long as nobody abused them. "What is that monkey doing?" Ashuria asked outraged, while I observed the holoscreen with a curious eye. "Drawing eyelashes on the bionic eye," I said with an amused smirk. "Damn monkeys. Katarina won't like a painted eye." The Inquisitor muttered and leaned back in my arms, while I massaged her boobs for profit and pleasure. "For them everything is art, my dear. Things might get smaller and more efficient, but it's a mere side effect of their purpose, which is to be artwork, not weapons," I explained gently while enjoying her malleable body and floral scent. Her personal biologist Ekpriest was a good perfume maker too, as strange as it may sound. And if my rogue trader's senses tingled at the opportunity to sell priceless perfume to noble ladies, well, it was true. There were a billion nobles in the galaxy, and I had an exclusive product for most of them. Trillions of thrones in that market and millions of desperate noble women eager to buy a single drop of exquisite angel scent No. 5. "I'll need you to obtain 100 perfume formulas from your Margas. Something my house can trade with nobles, and gain easy entry, perhaps set up stores on certain hive worlds, keep track of cultists and genestealers with hidden Auspex sensors," I proposed as Ashuria began panting harder at my deft massage. "Yes, whatever. Now make love to me already," she demanded in a needy voice. "It will be my pleasure, sweet lady." And after I was done with fragrant Ashuria, it was the turn of Lady Day and her 30 needy princeps friends. Perhaps next week, bed the new Inquisitor after she recovered from surgery? We shall see. I quite enjoy this part of my duty, bedding pretty women from all over the galaxy, sometimes making them pretty and young first, if they had valuable experience to bring in exchange. Just like Silentia Knight, the old night pilot I have recovered from Ignorus. Nearly 5 centuries old, but she now looked about 40 and her scars had vanished, leaving only a small tattoo instead. Rejuvenate treatment, healthy food and body training, plus a sword bout with a couple of orcs, and my new house knight made a formidable teacher for Knight and Titan pilots alike. Even for the Lamenters and Silent Sisters piloting Leviathan Dreadknights. I also kept watch for other Freeblade pilots, locating the Obsidian_Knight and his hidden base in the fringe. Not hidden from the Pharos, even on that remote barren world. The old guy had a small school, with 5 students being trained to become his heirs. Or perhaps a single one, after a battle royale. He only had the one night suit, after all, and a small gun cutter to transport it. I could take them all, if they swore themselves to my house. I didn't manage to finish all this, because a new crisis arrived. The Salamander's homeworld of Nocturne would be attacked soon, and forces would rally in defense_of_Nocturne. Time to make myself helpful, once again. I promised myself not to cheat much, so I didn't bring any carriers. 3 battle barges, 3 battle cruisers and 30 cruisers, leaving the battleships behind to finish upgrades and defend my lands. Sweet Ashuria wasn't interested in fighting Chaos Marines, preferring to study more Xenos and their tech, but Lady Greyfax was, very much. If Katarina objected to the new upgrades to her armor and weapons, as well as her body, she didn't say. But I know she loved the new relic power sword with a null wand in the handle. "I should thank you for this gift, Lord Lancefire. You might be a special type of Astartes, but you try your best even handicapped as you are," the woman said over our meal, and patted her sword. I blinked in confusion. "Handicapped, my dear? You don't have Astartes organs, so you need to use Mechanicus implants. As for your blank genes, they are useful, I suppose," the Inquisitor explained in a casual tone. I smiled genially and extended my hand over to hold her hand. "It is because of my genes that I refused the organs, Lady Katarina. I have duties both as a rogue trader and as a noble knight, which means I need to provide heirs and pilots, plus blank suns for the Lamenter chapter, and others. If you weren't so pretty. I don't trust pretty men, she murmured while squeezing my hand softly. I sighed and moved her over in my lap, while mentally asking Canis and Raffen to leave the room. I wasn't like this before I got angelic genes. This face is sanguineous showing off. Here, how I looked before that. I explained, projecting a few picked screens of my childhood and teenage years, stopping right after Estobon. You had a silly look, especially as a child. So serious, she exclaimed while examining my life story. Well, I was raised by a tech priest. Father was a rogue trader, busy conquering the Lance Firelands from feral humans and orcs. My mother, Justin, was a blank assassin for the Inquisition. She died while killing Fulgrim on Estobon 3. Then I killed Lorga and began building my own forces, and didn't stop since then. And here I am, rescuing beautiful damsels and liberating the salamanders. I narrated in a half-melancholic voice. Beautiful damsel, huh? I suppose I could give you a chance, Lord Pef. A few years, while I build up new connections in this strange new galaxy, Katarina whispered and leaned into me. I kissed her cheek and held her in embrace, giving both of us time to adjust. When we have children, I will keep most of them. Pilots and captains and space marines. But you'll have a blank daughter soon enough, to raise and train. My daughter Janice is on Terra right now, in the Golden Throne room. I'm not sure what title she'll get, but at least an Inquisitor, and a blank one, I whispered as my hands began fondling her heavy breasts, and she squirmed in delicious embarrassment. I never said anything about kids. But really, the Golden Throne? She asked, a bit confused. I took my left hand away and pointed at the corner, making an Adeptus Custodes appear. A real one too. By the Emperor. Is that? She exclaimed and jumped from my lap. Yes, Inquisitor. I was held by the same Necron that captured you. Lord Lancefire managed to liberate me. The Custodes spoke in a cursive High Gothic, like he rarely spoke anything else. Your name? Inquisitor Greyfax demanded sternly. I am Custodian Warden Tauromachus _Ossian. And from now on, I will watch over you, Inquisitor Greyfax, as the Emperor commands. The man clad in golden oromite declared solemnly. This meant she was important in some way to the Imperium, but I knew that already. And when he says watch, he means just looking, not helping at all. It's what they do, these golden brothers of mine. So don't count on his aid, like all the others who died at his feet. I commented wryly, and sipped more wine. His eyes glowed golden for a second, as if consulting his boss. Probably so. Some aid might be allowed, against demonic forces. The custodian muttered with a rumbling voice. I shrugged, as I didn't expect much from the guy anyway. Join us for a meal, brother. It's not the usual Nutra-Gruel, but I'm sure you can digest steak and vegetables just fine, maybe even white bread. Ossian smiled grimly and began wolfing down enough food to feed 10 normal citizens. So I turned towards the amazed Inquisitor, and raised an eyebrow. You were saying, my dear? Something about the Golden Throne? Never mind. I need a drink. In fact, I'll take a bottle. Katarina grumbled and gulped the wine to wash away her sorrow. I'll be in my room, enjoying the company of a silent sister, I announced proudly and walked out, patting Canis on his head as he received me at the door, curious. An hour later, a slightly drunk Inquisitor burst into my room and climbed all over me, ignoring the 3 other women in my bed. I would like that blank daughter now, she demanded with a stern voice. The forces I had brought with me were seemingly small, if you consider classic organization in the Imperium. Merely 5 auxiliary regiments, only 1 of them armored, plus 4 Astartes companies and our pilot tech marines. But when the drop pods began falling in the defense of my Salamander's brothers, then kept coming, and then still kept coming. I had 20 drop cruisers now, each able to launch 80,000 small drop pods containing mostly tarantula turrets, but also light vehicles like armed sentinels and guardian walkers. They also carried attack drones, fighter squadrons, and a bomber squadron, plus the normal capital ship's weapons, mostly lance and plasma batteries. The heavy cruisers and the battle cruisers provided the main long-range fire, with both torpedoes and lances, while the battle barges brought the slow rear with ground invasion forces, plus thousands of tech priests and millions of servitors for battlefield repairs or rapid conscription. Gone were the days when my ship's lower decks were filled with malnourished indentured serfs, prone to revolts and chaos infiltration. Servitors could do the same jobs without complaints, and were very unlikely to revolt. In an anvil and hammer tactic, our faster cruisers struck from the flank while the battle barges took the brunt of the invasion fleet head-on, while fighters and bombers struck at the more vulnerable escorts with missiles and bombs. It seemed these chaos traitors lacked numbers and filled their ranks with Xenos, mostly corrupted Karatech hunter packs from the Maelstrom zone. Well then, ugly bastards, you made my shit list now and your small stellar kingdom will soon suffer 9 deep strike with nicely inscribed torpedoes in High Gothic. Yes, I admit I cheated a little at the end, when the last 5 ships of the traitors were about to escape in the warp. Couldn't chase after them, especially with warpless engines, could I? So, those ships didn't enter warp, but instead vanished into System Sun, fueling the star with more atoms. Chapter Master Tushan welcomed me with some suspicion, despite an Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor at my right side, a giant space wolf to my left, and a bodyguard of blood angels, silent sisters and even a lone white scar captain named Khan. "Hello brother. You seem displeased at our timely rescue?" I asked in a teasing voice. "There are a million drop pods on my world, Master Lancefire, plus knights and tanks and a legion of combat walkers. Makes me feel a bit anxious," the black-skinned man muttered while his red eyes measured Canis with some surprise. I shrugged and didn't comment on that. It was true. We're inducting only blanks now, so we have to compensate for low numbers of battle brothers with other types of troops. You have to admit the turrets are effective, right? Only blanks? And those silent sisters provide fresh recruits, I suspect? The master of the salamanders wondered with a curious glance towards the pariah women. I avoided the delicate subject, at least for now. It is an effective solution for the constant traitor problem that plagues all Astartes chapters. I'm also providing some blank recruits to the Blood Angels and the Blood Ravens, as blanks are immune to certain mutations. I explained patiently as I examined the big holomap of the star system. It seemed the salamanders were constructing a warpless transceiver relay, as well as outfitting a battle barge with warpless engines. I didn't ask where they got the STC templates from, but Forge Angstrom was quite close as was a Cartron. The man nodded slowly and gestured for another space marine to come closer. "This is Captain Yonundus Cortana, from the Black Dragons." He introduced his ally. "Captain Tanner, I sense you have a problem?" I asked in a soft tone. The black-skinned man nodded politely and shook my hand, then pointed at a side door. "If you have some spare time, Master Lancefire?" Sure enough, the Black Dragons had a small mutation problem and were willing to test a company of blank dragons. "Helping your parent chapter here, Captain?" I asked instead. "My ships were in this area, and we simply did our duty, Lord Lancefire," he answered in a gruff tone. "Fine, don't admit it then. Yours is a fleet-based chapter, correct?" I asked to make sure. "Just as your lamenters," Captain Tanner answered curtly. "What I propose is this, Captain. Meet your boss, and have your chapter travel to Machine Forge in the Fringe. Try to bring something to trade, derelict cruisers or large hulls that can hold warpless engines. We'll outfit your ships with the best technology of the Mechonicus, including Blackstone armor. Then, we'll conduct a series of tests to find a suitable bloodline that accepts your gene seed," I offered with a large smile. "So it's a compatibility problem. Bloodlines?" The Black Dragon mused in deep thought. "Yes, not every blank is an accepted recruit. Some get poisoned during implantation. Mostly wild blanks, dragged from slums and lower decks. My own children are much more resilient, but there's a hard limit of how many kids a blank can have. Also, I do have 100 blank daughters training to become ship captains. In time, they will also give birth to more blanks," I said with a thin smile. "I see. That's why you remain a neophyte, to produce more recruits. Makes you weaker personally, but straightens your chapter over time. A harsh sacrifice to make," the captain said in a pitiful tone. I think he misunderstood the situation, but sure. Call me a saint for my sacrifice if it helps. I prefer to fight with my mind. I got Lorga and Abaddon after all, plus I burned down Kamara. Let me introduce you to my new companion, I announced in a cheerful voice, and moved Custodian Ossian next to me. Stop doing that, Lord Lancefire. I get dizzy. The morose Adeptus Custodes protested in my mind and punched my shoulder, hard enough I felt it through my artificer power armor. An Adeptus Custodes? And a warden at that. The captain observed in surprise and saluted his superior in golden power armor. None of that, brother. Inquisitor Greyfax and me will need to travel a bit, so we'll borrow your strike cruiser till we reach Forge Riser. If you agree, of course. The custodian asked politely, but it was an order anyway. It will be my honor, Warden. Traveling to Riser is acceptable, as long as you keep the Lady Inquisitor off my back. The captain muttered, not too pleased. Introduction made, I moved the custodian again, letting the black dragon think the custodian had magic powers or something. I can walk just fine, Ossian shouted in my mind. Yes, but it is more fun this way, golden brother. Plus it enhances your stature to move anywhere at will, I explained patiently. One day I will punch that angelic face of yours, he promised in retribution. Again with punching my face. Nobody knew to have fun in this damned horror galaxy. I can see you'll be glad to escape from the Inquisitor and Custodian. He even left a dent on your pauldron, Captain Tanner pointed out with a wry voice. He is a good guy, but eats too much. Luckily, I have a space wolf and the meat pellets were enough to feed them both, I answered with shrug. Ossian did eat the pellets too, damn his over-energetic stomach. At least he didn't eat them from the same bowl. Perhaps it is he who is glad to leave your company. Anyway, that Steel Rain strategy of yours, perhaps other chapters can try it, once they have dropped cruisers, he proposed in a curious tone. I would prefer my children drop among a million of friendly turrets, especially amidst an Ogre or some Tyrannid swarm. Swords and pistols are rather feeble force multipliers. So if you want blank Astartes of my bloodline, you will not spend them like bolter rounds, I retorted in a colder voice. Then I turned and left, leaving the captain to sort things out in his mind. Soon after, I sat down with Master Tushin to negotiate some technology and machinery transfer. This data slate, no wonder your chapter has so many tanks and turrets. You make them yourselves? The man asked, curious. Why would I do that? I have 2 forge worlds in the Eastern Fringe, producing armor and vehicles for my chapter, my auxiliary regiments and my trader dynasty. Plus, I trade with 30 forge worlds for more regiments and ships. Burn a Necron world, locate Blackstone deposits, trade it to a forge. Chase after pirates, board their ships and return them to service after upgrades. I even found a Gloriana battleship left derelict somewhere, I explained with a smug tone. A Gloriana? What name? He asked a bit wary. It was called Light of Terror, a dozen millennia ago. Needs a new name, maybe Singularity. Yeah, it isn't like anybody makes them anymore. I mused in a thoughtful voice. You do have too much luck, Lord Lancefire. Our own Gloriana, the flame-wrought, has disappeared somewhere. The Salamander's master muttered in dismay. Well, I can offer you 10 Los Angeles destroyers and 40 Retribution pattern land raiders, plus 3 blank captains for your battle barges. But in exchange, I want you to offer protection to several hive worlds nearby. Set up orbitals forts, clean the underhives of gangs and genstellars, and recruit 100 auxiliary regiments. When the Tyrannids arrive, 1,000 Astartes will not be nearly enough. We'll need trillions of soldiers, and millions of warships. We are the defenders of humanity, not of magma worlds, I demanded in a stern voice. So that's your big plan? Throw untrained guardsmen at space bugs until they drown in blood? Tushin exclaimed in outrage. Guardsmen, PDF, turrets and sentinels and every weapon we have. Or everyone will die, Master Tushin. I do have plenty of destroyers now, and I'll start spreading them to frontier chapters as soon as they get modified to the stronger patterns. But they are only useful for defense. To attack, we need cruisers with Nova cannons, and warpless engines. Carriers too, if you can capture sail cruisers or terror ships and have them refitted to carry corvettes and starfighters, I concluded and sat up from the Plastol days. Looting the orcs. Where has the Imperium fell? He grumbled in displeasure. I completely agreed, but reality was like that. Harsh and unpleasant. I will do my part, and help others do theirs, even if they didn't like it. We're still going to get eaten by Tyranids, most likely. Anyways, because I mentioned the orcs, I had another target in mind, the industrial world known as Bork, to the north of my kingdom in the fringe. Massive numbers orcs were gathering there and preparing another huge war, and the locals weren't quite able to resist. So, as soon as the troops and drop pods were recovered, I departed towards Forge Antax to drop off the new recruits for the Blood Angels, 200 young blank men still dutifully pumping babies into our Katakan auxilia, in between training and more lessons. Mixing business and pleasure, but pregnant women were generously given 3-year leave from military service, and thus it was quite acceptable for them too. Raising a kid was rather less stressful than battling chaos worshippers after all. If the Katakan female soldiers were lucky, they'll escape another round of service with the next batch of blank recruits, and so on. Reach 10 kids, they could retire on a colony world or receive a military promotion for exemplary service. However, the great success were the new generations of Katakans in the colonies, a healthy stock of hardy people that received 5 classes of schooling for free and 5 more for a minimal tax that actually covered the salaries for scribes and acolytes. Couldn't do too much at once, but these educated citizens would form the foundation of my real power in the fringe, in a slight copycat system of the Tau Fire caste. They would all be soldier citizens with sufficient technical expertise to operate machines and weapons, while the brightest of them would be promoted higher in administration or as tech priests. The clans formed around my daughters and their blank children held the reins of power on those worlds, supported by local regiments and the tech priest class. As for the ecclesiarchy, sadly I couldn't be rid of them, only bend them towards a more female-oriented priesthood, with the Adeptus Sororitas performing any important role. It worked somewhat, although pounding on the altar with a bolter gun and singing hymns of praise to the emperor to the congregation was not really my intent. I still had them monitored and under surveillance, just like I did everyone else. Fanatics were always dangerous, and they could always be turned against you. Anyways, soon enough I was offered tea and cake by the fabricator of Antax, who seemed rather happy to see me. Lord Lancefire, so rare to see you, lately. I can only gather rumors and astropathic transcripts of your exploits from my sources. He began and patted my head in a familiar gesture. I sure hope so. Been fighting my way from one end of the galaxy to the other. Got the bastard Abaddon too? I replied in a gentle voice. Yes, I heard about Pythos. Shame it had to be burned. The Archmagos muttered politely and spread some incense for the lost souls. There was a big demon warp rift under the Hive City. I suspect the Grey Knights did not want to take any chance. I explained in a sad tone, and drank more tea. See? It's information like this that makes you so valuable, Lord Pef. Plus all those STC templates. The fabricator said with a cant praising the Omnisire. I sighed and slumped in my chair. How is Faithful? I asked instead. Anathema class mnemonic erasure. He still lives, but that's it. I take it you had a part in his adventure? The tech priest asked sternly. He chose that by himself, fabricator. And you don't want to know why? What about Margus Gyron? I wondered curious. Yes. Gyron, your mentor. He is inside with my best Kogi experts, slowly awakening the holy machine, one data stack after another. The delegation from Mars is pushing for a faster resolution though. It will destroy Palomar for sure, when the ancient spirit awakens. He explained in a manifold transmission. Claim an imminent invasion and evacuate them. And use the damn blank interfaces and Geller fields, plus construct warpless engines. The Speranza must never run to the warp. I advised him while scrolling his trading list. Antax has grown greatly since I last been here, both in fleet power and manufacturing capacity. Billions of the new infantry hellguns were already in stock, plus a million new light vehicles. Everything from cheap weasels and rapiers, to chimeras and hydras and manticores, plus basilisks and armed sentinels. Not that many heavy tanks, but instead they made attack drones and cheap interceptors, millions of tarantula turrets and even guardian walkers. Pretty much copying the production list of Forge Retribution, and magnified by 100. So what happens on the world engine? I've seen forges that don't even have blackstone plates for Astartes armor. I asked while doting my requisition list. I could raise 1,000 new regiments easily, if I had the manpower. But the fabricator had surely thought of that too. Mars again, Lord Lancefire. They want everything catalogued and researched carefully. My forge was first on the scene, and we got away with a gigaton of samples, although the Xenos technology of the Necrons is highly puzzling and accidents are frequent. Perhaps you can aid us in this matter? The fabricator asked cautiously. I nodded and took out a data stack, then connected it to my implant, downloading a list with 100 known Necron devices and their basic functions, plus marking a dozen as extremely dangerous, my eyes only. If they found transdimensional devices, I didn't want them playing at science with them. My Auto-Xenos friends also research many xenosamples. I gave you what is known, and what is proven dangerous. If you find anything on the red list, I can trade them further for Archaeotech and Dark Age devices. Or you can blow up the sun by accident and spare me the trouble, I claimed in a soft voice. The tech priest read the data stack and crushed it a minute later. Dangerous knowledge indeed, Lord Pef. We have a silver runic cube like you pointed out. It gives out strange dimensional signatures, and we thought it to be a teleportarium node. But obviously is not, or much more. And I heard you also have one, and can even use it? I sighed and nodded. It is a tactical weapon, able of planetary scale effects, including teleportation. Inquisitor Emmaus has another, so never cross her. Consider it an alpha-level psyker, without knowledge of using the powers, pressing cogitator keys at random. Tactical, so it's a mere low-level device. And an alpha psyker without control, always turns into a warp portal and then a demon world. The fabricator mused in a slow daze. Fabricator, the old ones fought the Necrons and they lost, despite creating races like the Orcs, the Jokero and the Eldar to fight for them. The Catan betrayed the Necrons after the war, and then they were vanquished as well. We're lucky they are waking up disorganized and with memories scrambled by millions of years of stasis damage. For if they were sane, we'd have to flee the galaxy, even through the swarm of Tyranids that comes our way, I whispered in a warning tone. Makes sense. A race of abominable intelligences just like our ancestors fought in the past. Your notes will help us make more sense of their technology. The Orcs are bad enough, hearing what's going on at Armageddon. He answered in a small voice, seeming tired and defeated. Yes, the Orcs. Heavy nerve gas will help for now. Send a manufactorum ship with me to Hawk Prime, and start a new forge there. Light weapons and vehicles and nerve gas, for now. We'll raise 1,000 PDF regiments and crush the Orcs, clean up the place and make it profitable. I bet we'll find plenty of hulls in orbit, maybe even space hulks. I advised the Margus with a wry smile. Sure. There are some rogue traders in that area, maybe a new domain can be formed, and we'll get another link in the chain. So what STC templates have you found lately, Lord Pef? He asked with a level voice. I just took out my newest work, including the Vigilus force fields and the Ragnarok tanks, plus a few Tau-based patterns. Very nice discoveries, Lord Pef. The Bastion fields seem familiar, and the Ragnaroks are easy enough to produce, depending on the main weapon. However, these plasma fusel patterns are much more advanced and will take decades to establish the proper rites of awakening. Maybe Ryza or Metallica can make them right now. The man replied in an interested tone, then glanced at me for confirmation. Good. I'm certain similar patterns will appear on various derelicts all over the galaxy soon. If the forges still do not share, there are other forces that can do it for them, breaking up space hulks to release the knowledge locked inside. I'm not sure they'll be the same, but most parameters will be there. Probably better than the fragments I recovered so far. I announced in a knowing tone, then offered my hand for a handshake. The fabricator grabbed me a bit wary. I knew it was you. Somehow, you are doing Omnissiah's work, even against all odds. It's not just me, my friend. Anyway, we need to accelerate the exodus to the fringe. At least 100 billion in 20 years, and 1 trillion in a century. Mostly young women, if possible, I demanded while turning away to leave. The fabricator stared after me in silence, Cyborg's arms clenching his tentacles as if afraid. I did show my hand though, and it must have unsettled him. I have been struggling to keep cheating at a minimum, mainly to allow my crew and troops to experience real combat. I wouldn't always be there to babysit them, and experience was as important as better weapons. The Orcs made easy opponents anyway, when you had correct tactical information and orbital superiority. Take that away, like on Armageddon, where the giant space hulk in low orbit was denying the Imperium orbital support, while the thick air pollution and metal dust forced the troops to engage Orcs in melee, even Nemks and Gargants, and it quickly became a clusterfuck. I was in two minds about interfering there, because the entire galaxy was watching, and showing my hand too soon will not result in praise but sanctions and accusations. On the other hand, it would be a giant battlefield filled with amazing loot and profit opportunity. No. Bad Pef. We don't want our children burned alive. Stick to the plan, and avoid the solar segmentum until Gilliam clears the way. Anyways, by setting up a forge here at Hawk Prime, the place will become rich and attractive in a short time, while the local criminals and gangs provided human resources for servitors and forced labor. Antax will need to import a few billion immigrants to develop the place properly, but a wealth of metal from the space hulk fragments we found in the system will keep the forges and the dockyards busy for a millennium without much other imports. And as usual, we picked a moon to set up the chemical and radioactive industry, while the planet itself would still be able to produce food for itself, without getting overwhelmed by pollution and toxic chemicals. From Hawk we arranged a small expedition to expand the domain to 50 planets nearby, and reach Jonol, a feral world that housed the Honored Sons chapter. It was a pathetic place, truly. Luckily for them, I was in a good mood, so I offered them 10 torpedo destroyers and a light cruiser with drop pods, plus another company of blank recruits and captains for their ships. Their chapter master Seneca was rather suspicious, especially when I handed him another power sword with a null wand inside. This relic blocks the warp, brother. It gives me no pleasure to hunt down corrupted space marines, like the late chapter master of the Blood Ravens and Huron of the Astral Claws. We were meant to defeat any foes, including demons. I explained patiently while Canis grinned at the honored son with teeth the size of combat knives. Perhaps the wolf found the traitor bones crunchy? And in exchange? I know this isn't free, the man exclaimed with a wary glance at my wolf. I mentally urged Canis to walk away, as his teeth were not helping right now. There are worlds nearby that need your protection, Master Seneca. Places like Exotia and Formand, where an array of orbital forts and a patrol fleet will defend humanity, especially if you raise 100 auxiliary regiments and clean up cults and corruption. And train 1,000 tech marines to pilot your tanks and gunships, for Emperor's sake, I demanded in a low growl, mirrored by my wolf. I'll have to speak with my captains and librarians, Lord Lancefire. But sending 1,000 neophytes to Mars for training is too much, he claimed in an outraged voice. Who said anything about Mars? Forge Megaire and Triplex Fel are much closer. Have your barges and cruisers fitted with warpless engines and Nova cannons, requisition 1,000 sentinels for each regiment, and even infantry auxilia can defend against small invasions. The Imperium hamstrings the Imperial Guard with their minimal use of vehicles, but we're not so limited, are we, brother? I asked rhetorically and offered my hand. He was hesitant in taking my hand, knowing already it wouldn't be all that easy. You act like a Primarch, damn you. You even have Sanguinius's face, he murmured in a not too pleased tone. I do? I don't recall giving out orders and writing a codex. I answered cheerfully and turned away, walking towards the landing bay. And yet, it is exactly what you did, strange lamenter. Master Seneca murmured at my back, although I pretended not to hear him. He was right, of course. I was setting up objectives and achievement targets, while inserting my own blank sons into his command structure. Helping too, with ships and advice, just like any good Primarch would. I just didn't expect the man to be so perceptive. Then again, Astartes did have better minds than most people, and a chapter master was not picked for his painting skills. From here, my fleet to Corilax, the homeworld of the Knights of the Raven, where pretty much the same deal took place. I tasked them to watch over Newseum and the growing stellar domain of my daughter Andrea, now an independent rogue trader with her own warrant. However, the chapter master was a psyker, and unwilling to be separated from his gift, so I gave the power sword to his second-in-command, and tasked him with keeping constant watch over his boss, in case he fell too. I almost got stabbed for that, until I reminded him of Gabriel Angelos and his fight with his own chapter master. Captain Goyon just glared at me and took the sword with disgust. "This not a honorable task, Lord Lancefire. The great enemy is not honorable, brother. Psychers are always exposed to the warp, and the voices they hear are rarely good. My own Primarch died at his corrupted brother's hand, and millions of traitor Marines plague the galaxy. As for the sword, you were not lucky enough to be born a blank, but with this sword you can still do your duty, even when faced with a demon prince. Just like Captain Semnai from my second company did. He helped kill Corruptus, and even lived to have a laugh about it." I answered with a wry voice, and offered my hand. Naming the sword duty was too much. Now I can never put it down. The man complained as he examined the power sword with competent eyes. I just smiled and patted his armored shoulder. "It is very light though. You won't even feel its weight," I explained in fake naivety, then walked away and scratched Canis as a reward for keeping me safe. "Why does it feel so heavy though?" the Astartes captain murmured softly, while testing a few sword moves at lightning-fast speed. A week later, we arrived at Sternet to trade with the Iron Lord Space Marines, gifting them maimed soldiers as new recruits, and more torpedo destroyers and another light cruiser with drop pods. Plus the now familiar null sword, blank captains from my many daughters who wanted a capital ship, and a hangar filled with blackstone to protect their armor and vehicles from warp and weapon damage. Unlike other chapters though, these guys were really grateful for my help, especially knowing of my deeds on Estobon personally, many of them having been there along with their Iron Hands founding chapter, and knew of my mother's sacrifice to kill Fulgrim. And since Fulgrim killed their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, well, it was a big debt for them. So I offered them a standing invite to Forge Machine for repairs and supplies and free training for 1,000 tech marines, and their ruling council immediately agreed. It was a bit strange to deal with a rather democratic leadership, but such was their way, and it worked for them. It also helped that all of their Iron captains had mind impulse units, creating another bond between us. As for their task, I charged them with protecting Hive-world Agrellan and the nearby planets exposed to the Tau Empire's expansion, where their technical expertise would be needed to combat the advanced technology of the Tau. In fact, they promised to adopt my operational procedure entirely, as long as they could receive walkers and drop pods and every other type of equipment. Brothers, Forge Machine is not an unlimited supply depot. You will have to send diplomatic ships to other forges, like Estobon and Tigris, and requisition material for this task, plus more ships. Or have them provide Manufactorum ships to set up a new forge in the Agrellan system, and produce everything locally, while you raise and train auxiliary regiments. The Hive world can support 1,000 regiments without worry, especially after you clean up the underhives and increase production. I told their council in a sterner voice. "You're right, Lord Lancefire. If we want a miracle, we have to work for it. But with 1,000 auxiliary regiments, we should be able to retake the lost human worlds from those Farsight_enclaves. It will take a decade or two, but we will do it," their Lord Captain promised ceremoniously. "Here, here. For the blood of Ferrus Manus," the other Iron captains chanted in an eerie chorus. The Tau use missiles and railguns in large numbers, so you'll need flare shields for armor, and lots of aircraft to engage their rapid grav tanks and mobile suits. And never engage if you lack orbital superiority. Consider the Tau are all tech priests, and you'll have a better estimation of their real strength, I explained in a gentle voice. Their enthusiasm halted at once, and they became more sober. "We'll need more tech marines then. But there have to be millions of maimed guardsmen everywhere. And many of them enroll even at 14 or 15 years old." Sadly it was true. With lifespan on feral and feudal worlds rarely passing 40 years of age, and even Hive world rarely reaching 50, people started duty at a younger age, not that they had school to occupy their days anyway. Work, pray, sleep, often 10 people in a 20-meter room. Child labor was so common it was nearly the norm, while injuries and disease were almost never treated among the masses. Crime was rampant and corruption ubiquitous. The Imperium of 40k was a hellhole, and humanity has lost its meaning. There was little humane left in humans, and nothing humane in our enemies. For in the grim dark future, there was only war. By the time I returned at Machine Forge, after a short diplomatic voyage to show the flag and uphold several Astartes chapters with infusions of ships, manpower and advice, 2 years have passed and more progress had been made. Children were born, ships repaired, even the Blackstone fortress had been cleaned up of chaos vestiges and sanctified by the cult Mechonicus with their own Magi-tech rituals. I would have to start my fucking job again, not that I didn't enjoy most of this duty. Only Lady Verlaine was around this time, still keeping a watchful eye on the new forge and preventing more outrageous Mechonicus experiments from going too far. The tech priests sent to the fringe weren't the most loyal and stable after all, and their various inner cults had quite dubious agendas sometimes. There were also 3 new ships in the system, one being a derelict great cruiser missing half its prow, very likely the gift from Trzin the Infinite, one was an Ark Mechonicus with marking of Mars, and one was a Dark Angel's strike cruiser, containing only 2 Astartes and the surf crew. Well, I had avoided the bigwigs on Mars for far too long. They probably wanted a share of the loot too. Probably all of it, if they had their way. What does Mars want from us? I asked Gemina directly in her mind. Pef? They want to inspect all our facilities, make sure there is no heretic work done here. And, they want to inspect your chapters Gene Seed and the Blank Astartes. I also suspect they want clones, she whispered back, all while escorting the Mars delegation throughout the labs. Yeah, we're not going to do that. Anyway, that could wait. I will first meet the Dark Angels and see what the Lion Primarch wanted from me. Names? I asked as they entered my hangar bay. I am Brother Rapparan and this is Lexicanum Merlith. Have you heard of the battle of the Caliban system? He replied in a monotonous voice, with the Lexicanum Astartes recording every word beside him. I was busy. I answered curtly and eyed the Lexicanum guy with suspicion. Psychers were always bad news. Well, we managed to defeat the traitors and even captured some of them. Your name was cursed many times during interrogations. They seem to think it was your fault, for their defeat. Which is rather curious, since we are quite sure you were never at Caliban, in your entire life. Brother Rapparan explained while measuring my space wolf for a steak, while Canis did the same, only medium rare. What can I say? Ask them more details. I have been burning traitors left, right and center for 50 years at least. I answered in a casual tone, and stepped closer to the Lexicanum, making the guy back off a few steps. We know, Lord Lancefire. I was on the rock at Pythos. The man muttered while gesturing to Merlith to stand his ground. So I got even closer, patting the Lexicanum psyker on his shoulder. Astartes fear nothing, Brother Merlith. And yet, here you are shivering and sweating, while warp voices howl in your head with murderous cries. Where is your courage, Dark Angel? I wondered in a friendly voice, making the man flinch from a gentle pat on his hood. Anathema. You are a black soul. He growled back, stepping back once more and holding his staff toward me away. Rather cute, if he wasn't a fucking Astartes. You are an idiot, Merlith. Blanks are psychers too, only immune to warp. Only I don't have shields or invisibility powers like the Silent Sisters, nor can I reverse warfields and banish demons like the Pariah. Instead, other psychers like yourself have hunted out blanks all over the galaxy, just to gain more secular power. Inquisitors, navigators, astropaths, and cardinals, even librarians, all corrupt to their very soul by the warp. And you dare call me anathema? How many of your chapter have fallen to chaos? 40,000? That's 40,000 reasons you should kiss my feet, because I will never fall. Get the fuck out of my ship, and never enter my presence again. Or I will burn your corrupt soul to ash, I shouted and kicked him away, Sparta style. I did wear power armor, so it worked too, sending the psyker skidding along the metal floor for 20 meters. Canis chased the exiled Lexicanum to his dropship, carrying his staff in the mouth, like a small bone. I'm sorry for my brother, Lord Lancefire. Psychers are sometimes sensitive to blanks, and the superstitions do not help either. The Wand of the Rock said in a peaceful tone. Go back to burning Imperium's worlds, brave defender of humanity. Your fanatic chapter is not welcomed here. I answered in an angry tone, and pointed at his dropship. He turned and walked away, possibly trying to figure out when the negotiations went wrong. Did I snub a big Astartes chapter by this? I sure hope I did. Some things were not okay, and knowing and seeing were very different. I kinda hope they will all become fallen, so I would have a reason to burn their zealot corpses into a sun. Not really. They would be useful enough stirring trouble and fighting traitors in other places. I couldn't be everywhere, and they even had a Primarch now. An hour later, I met with the Mars delegation, led by some high-ranking magi that were supposed to make me feel impressed. "What do you want, Mars Forge?" I asked them directly. "It has come to our attention that you've acquired many exotic and even Xeno artifacts that shall be turned over to the Forge. And you also need to offer us access to the lamented gene seed and the blank Astartes, for detailed examination." The tallest Magus demanded from 1 meter above me. Of course. As soon as Mars shares all the technology it has. Unless you have brought the complete database, you have 1 hour to leave my system or be destroyed. 59 minutes now, I answered with a genial smile. "You cannot do this. The Imperium." The other Magus tried to argue in near panic. "We are not in the Imperium here." 58 minutes, I continued with a softer voice. "Are you really going to rebel, Lord Lancefire?" the first Magus asked with surprise. "There is nothing to rebel from. You have no authority here, and I do. Bring out every STC template you have, and share it with my forge. Then, we can trade. Until then, you are trespassers trying to steal from me, and we burn criminals to the stake here." 57 minutes, I continued as my bodyguard raised their weapons and began advancing, as ordered. The two Magi exchanged a glance and walked away towards their Mechonicus dropship. It seemed today was a terrible day for negotiations. The Arch Mechonicus exchanged 100 engrammatic messages with Machine Forge till the time was up, then turned away and fled as my own ships formed up for an assault. Not that I would destroy a priceless ship like theirs. They were idiots anyway, trying to force my hand like this. It wasn't like I would let them call a punitive expedition on my house. The Arch Mechonicus opened a warp window and vanished, and ended up in my tesseract beside all the other loot. Yet another ship lost in the warp, like millions ships before it. Even if they didn't have the best technology of Mars on that ship, it would be more advanced than Forge Retribution had. Perhaps just enough technology to repair the Gloriana and make it great again. A week later, during my regular visit at Retribution, an intact but empty Arch Mechonicus appeared in the system and was quickly taken over by my fabricator Dominus and his Codus priests, eager to examine the lost relic and its amazing technology. Nearby, a huge zero-G dockyard made from asteroids and metal scaffolds housed the Singularity battleship and its Singularity weapon, the Void Claw being slightly repaired and configured by a few Yoak Aero artisans, while new warpless engines and powerful plasma reactors were being assembled for the crown of my fleet. The regular battleships were less important and could be repaired and upgraded at Triplex Fallon Metallica, as well as Forge Lucius for those captured in the Expanse campaign. It would be slower, but at least I wouldn't have to worry about chaos or infiltrators here. Only my dynasty had access to Retribution, and few Inquisitors even knew its location. The big shipyards and factories of Machine Forge could not be hidden, and indeed were not meant to be hidden, with tech priests drawn from 30 Forge worlds and a big blackstone fortress right in the middle. As long as the Pharos was still operational, attacks will keep coming, and what better defense than a giant fleet, 1,000 forts, a giant battle station and the interest of 30 Forge worlds to keep their investment safe. Already fabricator Gemina wanted to open a new forge on a different moon, due to the influx of new acolytes that needed to be trained into more tech priests. Immigrants kept coming, and will keep coming as long as there were jobs here. Beside my lamented chapter and the Lancefire dynasty, even the Inquisition would be interested in keeping the Catan safe for constant interrogation, without knowing the true purpose of the prison. All except Rose, and her nebulous call to visit Terra and meet the Emperor. I was quite curious what came of that.